Hey guys, tonight we slip through the glowing arches of ancient Persia, past guards who have had a bit too much pomegranate wine, and into a palace chamber where queens gamble beneath the stars. You can smell the sandalwood smoke curling lazily from golden censers, and the floor is cool marble beneath your feet. The walls shimmer with mosaics, peacocks, cypress trees, and winged lions, while soft footsteps echo like whispers. And at the heart of this silken sanctum lies a chessboard of emerald and gold. But be careful, this is no ordinary game. The players are queens, the stakes, everything. And if you make the wrong move, well, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter during the hour just before dawn. Everything's tinted a soft blue haze, and the enormous hall you've crept into is nearly silent, except for the slow clack of emerald on gold. A queen, draped in violet silk, leans over the board with the poise of a panther. She has a tiny falcon perched on her shoulder, and her fingers tap the chessboard like she's unlocking a secret. You recognize the board. It's been whispered about across cities, caravans, and bathhouses. The game of queens. They say it's older than fire, older than kings, and only played when a dynasty teeters on the edge of disaster. In the corner, hidden behind sheer curtains, another queen waits her turn. She's younger, face half-shadowed, with a golden bracelet shaped like a serpent curling up her arm. She watches every move with the intensity of someone calculating war, marriage, and revenge all at once. Historians still argue whether these midnight games were just pastimes or political weapons disguised as leisure, but you feel it already. This isn't play. This is power negotiation with emerald teeth. The air is thick with perfume, ambergris, myrrh, rose oil, and you try not to sneeze as you crouch behind an alabaster statue. The queens don't notice you. They're too focused, too locked in their ancient ritual. Every piece on the board is carved from a different kind of gem. Emeralds for pawns, jade for knights, onyx for rooks. It's absurdly decadent, the kind of board someone would literally kill for. And fun fact, someone actually did. A fringe legend claims that during the rule of Darius II, a jealous concubine poisoned the inlaid gemstones with powdered nightshade, hoping the absorbed toxin would kill whichever queen held them longest. Was it real? Who knows? But it adds a little tingle to the fingertips when that violet queen picks up a rook. The rules here are a bit flexible. Queens play in pairs, in secret, and no two games follow the exact same logic. Some allow shadow pieces, invisible to everyone but the player. Others permit bribery. One game reportedly ended with a player slipping a cobra under the board while her opponent was distracted. That move was technically illegal, the judges mysteriously looked the other way. As you watch, the younger queen makes her move, knight to c3. Simple, safe. Or is it? The older queen's expression doesn't change, but her falcon twitches. She counters with a pawn slide, so subtle you almost miss it. But the entire room shifts. One servant drops a silver tray. A eunuch near the doorway actually gasps. Whatever just happened changed something. Now, you wouldn't know it from the polished statues and miles of sheer curtain, but this isn't a friendly place. In the Persian royal court, being born a queen doesn't guarantee power. You have to keep it night by night, move by move. Emerald chess isn't just for show. It's where marriages are arranged. Armies are redirected. Sometimes it's where future kings are made or unmade. And while we're on the subject, let's clear up a tiny misconception. Persian queens weren't shrinking violets. These women commanded cities, raised militias, and outwitted enemies in multiple languages. The chessboard was simply their war table in miniature, each emerald pawn, a soldier, each knight, a secret lover turned spy. And if you're wondering how the emeralds got their hypnotic glow, some say they were soaked in sacred wine beneath a full moon. Others say the queens whispered curses over them in old Elamite. Honestly, probably both. You shift a little on your feet. There's a draft. Somewhere behind the curtain, a hidden door creaks open, and a third queen slips into the room. She's wearing morning blue. Her eyes are hollow and rimmed with kohl. She doesn't play, not tonight, but she watches like someone who's already seen the game's ending. Her name is lost to time, but one scrap of papyrus found near Susa calls her the Mirror Queen. Maybe she's the one who taught the others the seventh rule gambit. Maybe she's just a ghost, but she's here, and you don't want to get too close. The game ends not with a checkmate, but a sudden bow. The older queen nods. The younger one smiles. And in that smile, you glimpse something unsettling, the certainty of a future already planned. A marriage will be canceled tomorrow. A general will be promoted. Someone in the treasury will fall ill. None of it will be traced back to this room, this board, or these queens. That's the beauty of the game. It leaves no fingerprints, just consequences. And as the queens rise and slip out into the labyrinth of halls beyond, the chessboard remains. Cold, gleaming, waiting for its next players. You step closer, breath shallow, and notice a single emerald pawn left standing in the center of the board, alone, defiant. You touch it. Your fingertip tingles. Oops. You step away from that lone emerald pawn still humming in your palm. Remember that tingle. And drift down a corridor lined with silken tapestries depicting long-forgotten hunting parties. Your footsteps are cushioned by thick carpets woven with saffron threads, and the chatter of servants folding linens fades behind you. Soon you find yourself in a smaller chamber, lit by ivory sconces shaped like crouching lions. In the center stands a low table, its surface a glossy expanse of black marble, on which rests another chess set, this one carved entirely from ivory. with pieces so finely detailed you can count the ridges on each knight's mane. A hush falls as Artemis enters, regal in her forest green robe, embroidered with silver pomegranates. Her eyes, dark as onyx, sweep the assembled council. Ministers draped in heavy brocade, generals with braided beards, and two envoys from Babylon clutching scrolls detailing a proposed marriage alliance. You almost smile at the absurdity. 20 people discussing your future, while a queen sits here, about to upend it all with a single move. Artemis doesn't bother with pleasantries. She lifts a pawn, its ivory surface cool against her fingertip, and places it deliberately on e5. It's a daring advance, straight into the heart of her counsel's position. Gasps ripple through the chamber. The envoy from Babylon nearly drops his scroll. A general's hand drifts toward the jeweled dagger at his belt. You can practically taste the tension, like biting into an unripe date. You lean in, watching as the council's leader, an aging vizier with a moon-shaped scar, steadies himself. He taps his staff thrice, as if invoking some ancient curse. That is not the agreed opening, he intones, voice echoing off the marble. Artemis's lips curl in amusement. Agreed openings bore me, she says softly, but every syllable anchors like an oath. I prefer gambits. Historians still argue whether Persian royalty ever played chess exactly like this, or if these grand sets were more for show than sport. But you know better. You see the way Artemis's fingers quiver at the memory of her brother's betrayal, how her gaze narrows when the vizier shifts his stance. This is personal. This is war by other means. The Babylonian envoys exchange glances. Their carved ivory rooks glint in the torchlight. They consider protesting, but the silence of Artemis's gaze stops them mid-sentence. You can practically hear the cogs turning in their heads. Marriage to a foreign princess was supposed to cement peace, not spark rebellion. A court musician drifts in, trailing notes on a reed flute. The melody is sweet, a lullaby for children of the court. But here it sounds ominous, like the soundtrack to a looming storm. You almost chuckle at the mismatch. Ivory chess set, war council, and flute music that belongs in some pastoral painting. But then Artemis moves again. Her bishop glides diagonally, cutting through the vizier's knight. A collective breath is held. Someone coughs. A guard's helmet rattles. Artemis doesn't flinch. She watches the check on that night, and you see her mind flicker back to her youth, when she learned to play chess beside her tutor under the date palms of Pasargadae. That tutor, an exiled Greek philosopher, taught her every strategy from the Ionic coast. Rumor says she once beat him blindfolded while reciting the Epic of Gilgamesh. Quirky scholars still debate whether that actually happened, or if it's just palace propaganda. You can't help but grin. There's something thrilling about witnessing genius unfold in real time. When the vizier rises to strike back, Artemis slides her queen forward in a move so swift you blink. Suddenly, the council is in checkmate. Trembling men stare at the board. Palaces of power toppled like brittle sandcastles. Silence reigns. The envoys, pale with shock, lower their scrolls. Their alliance, the marriage treaty they carried like a lifeline, lies forgotten on the polished floor. You imagine the ink drying on new contracts that night. Ink made from crushed beetle shells, scented with rosewater. Artemis stands and bows, ever so slightly. Her voice is calm. The alliance stands repealed. The coup is complete. A ripple of applause erupts from servants who understood the message before the ministers did. You step back, nearly stepping on your own heart, which is pounding so hard you're afraid someone will notice. The vizier's face contorts in fury, but he has learned a hard lesson. In Artemis's court, the chessboard is the law. He gathers up the ivory pieces, his hands shaking so violently the knights and pawns clatter like spilled seed pods. And as he turns to leave, Artemis's falcon, yes, the same one from the Violet Queen's game, swoops down and lands on his shoulder, its sharp eyes gleaming. You wonder if the bird's presence is symbolic or just showmanship. Fringe chroniclers claim Artemis trained that falcon to carry secret messages in its talons, messages that decide life or death. Historians still argue whether falconry was ever integrated into political plots. But here, it feels inevitable. You watch Artemis retrieve her ivory pawn from the board, raising it to the flickering torchlight. It glows like a tiny beacon, an emblem of victory. She holds it against her chest, like a heart. Her victory resonates beyond this marble chamber. Marriages will be cancelled, armies rerouted, grain shipments diverted. She has reclaimed power not with swords, but with strategic brilliance. You shift your weight. The chamber has returned to normal. Servants scurry in for refreshments. Soldiers adjust their armor, and the envoys gather their treaty scraps. But for you, nothing is the same. You have witnessed the Ivory Gambit. You have felt the hush, the shock, the thrill. And now, as Artemis strides past you, her green robes whispering against the black marble, she passes within arm's reach. You almost touch her sleeve. You almost murmur congratulations, but you don't. Instead, you tuck the emerald pawn into your cloak, a souvenir from a different game, a reminder that power can be played. You slip out of the chamber into the dark corridors, footsteps silent like a pawn's delicate travel. Behind you, the chamber doors close with a sonorous thud. The ivory board sits empty, except for that single pawn balanced on e5, waiting for the next bold player who dares the Ivory Gambit. You slip through a hidden door carved into polished cedar. The smell of aging wood and faint jasmine trailing behind you as you descend spiral stairs into the city of Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan. They would call it on a map, but here it breathes with ancient intrigue. The night air is cool on your skin, carrying the scent of damp stone and roasted lamb from distant streets. You pass a slumbering guard whose helmet clinks against the wall like a lullaby, and you almost trip over a stray cat with fur the color of old parchment. Typical, at the bottom, a narrow tunnel opens into a vaulted chamber lit by emerald torches. Yes, real emeralds, glowing with trapped fire. Because of course Persian queens wouldn't settle for mere flame. Around a low onyx table sit 3 women, each draped in robes dyed with indigo from Oman. Their eyes, framed by kohl, sparkle with fierce intelligence. Or is that just the reflection of the flickering emerald torches? You can't tell, maybe both. This is Ecbatana's secret council of queens, and they're playing 2 games at once, on the board, and in whispers thick as cypress smoke. The board itself is laid with jade pieces. Some claim the jade was mined under auspicious stars. Others that it was cursed by Zoroastrian priests to reveal betrayal. Historians still argue whether these curses were more than palace theatrics. But when you glance at the anxious glances between the queens, you start to wonder. Careful with that knight, one queen murmurs, her voice a soft purr. It bites. She touches a polished jade horse, and you flinch, half expecting it to snap back. Fringe scholars mention that some pieces were treated with venom, just enough to prick an enemy's finger. You chuckle to yourself. At this point, a chess injury is practically a spa treatment compared to palace politics. You settle onto a velvet cushion, careful not to disturb the intricate Persian rug beneath. Its patterns swirl like water, but you've been warned. This rug was so valuable that a minor noble once sold his entire estate to buy one exactly like it. Now that's commitment or madness. The oldest queen, her hair streaked with silver, leans forward and slides a pawn diagonally. "Your move, newcomer," she says, eyes glinting. You realize they've been expecting you. No wonder the guard didn't raise an alarm. They want you here. Great, because nothing says welcome like stumbling into a high-stakes conspiracy. You pick up your own jade bishop, cold and heavy, and consider your options. Every piece echoes with layered meaning. The rooks symbolize hidden arsenals, knights represent exile's emissaries, and queens, well, they embody lethal charm. Take one wrong step, and your destiny could be traded like a coin. The second queen, lips curved in amusement, recounts the tale of Queen Parasati's Ai, who reputedly bricked her rivals into walls of Ecbatana's palace. Mainstream fact, Parasati's Ai really did wield immense influence during Artaxerxes' Ai's reign. Quirky tidbit, rumor says she carried tiny crocodile dung pellets in her purse as sunscreen. And as a test of loyalty, mess it up, and you'd be exiled. Historians still argue whether the dung sunscreen story is fact or fable. But I'll admit, that one gave me pause when I first heard it. Please don't try it at home. You execute a knight's leap, capturing her pawn, and the chamber gasps. Candlelight dances on the jade, and for a moment you feel the weight of centuries pressing in. The third queen narrows her eyes. "Ah, you play boldly," she murmurs, voice low enough for only you to hear. Boldness is either brilliance or suicide. You almost quip that, hey, might as well aim for brilliance. but you swallow it. These women take their games seriously. A servant glides in, bearing goblets of rose-infused wine. You lift yours, the glass cool against your palm, and taste the delicate sweetness. It's the kind of wine that makes you whisper confessions you never intended to share. You almost admit you're here by accident, until you remember the guard, the sealed door, the emerald pawn humming in your cloak. Nope, you belong. The queens continue. Jade rook slides forward, bishop darts in, and suddenly the oldest queen's expression shifts. She leans back, hand trembling. You remember that earlier Ivory Gambit in Artemis's court. This feels just as momentous. A gasp escapes her lips as she realizes you've trapped her king. It's check. Silence hangs for a heartbeat, long enough for you to imagine listeners clutching their blankets, biting their nails. Then the oldest queen nods, a wry smile flickering. She lifts her hand and concedes. Another queen dethroned by a stranger. Good for you, you think, though your heart thumps so loud you hope it's just the rug muffling it. They rise, robes whispering, and draw back emerald curtains to reveal a marble stairway leading upward. Come, the silver-haired queen says. You've earned your place at our table. She gestures to a mural depicting Ecbatana's 7 concentric walls glittering under the sun. Here, she continues, we don't just gamble with emerald chess pieces. We gamble with alliances, loyalties, and sometimes life itself. You follow them up the stairs, mind racing. Courts across Persia would tremble if they knew queens here formed secret pacts, plotting over jade boards. This is the undercurrent that binds empires. Modern asides can't capture it. You could try posting a tweet about it, but no hashtag could hold the weight of these whispered vows. The corridor above is colder, lined with statues of Median kings who once ruled this place. Their stony gazes seem to judge you, but the queens pass on, their footsteps silent. As you emerge into a circular chamber, they gather around a polished table etched with a map of the empire. On it, tiny emerald and ivory markers denote provinces and armies. You see, the youngest queen says, her jade pieces clinking as she arranges them. We play many games, some on boards, some on maps, and some in dark tunnels like these. She taps a marker over the region of Media. Tonight's alliance, Babylon, Ecbatana, Susa, it's shifting under our hands. You inhale, realizing how easily borders bend when queens play in shadow. And though you've only just arrived, you sense you're part of the conspiracy now. A fringe whisper says these 3 women will determine the next emperor before sunrise. And historians still argue whether they influenced Artaxerxes' succession. You swallow another taste of rose wine and feel the jade warmth under the torches. The queens lean in close, voices low, plotting their next moves. You tuck your own jade knight into your cloak, a silent promise to return if you dare, because in Ecbatana's jade-eyed conspiracies, you learn that power is best wielded in whispers, and that sometimes the most dangerous move is simply to be invited. You follow the queens into a circular courtyard just as twilight ripples through the sky tonight. An eclipse is imminent. The stone floor is cool beneath your sandals, and the air smells of scorched thyme and distant salt flats. Above you, the moon inches across the sun's face like a shy spectator hiding behind a curtain. Torches flare to life, their flames dancing on polished columns carved with cuneiform warnings. You settle onto a marble bench, heart quickening with anticipation. This isn't just any evening gathering. It's the night of the solar eclipse, when the courts of Persia hold the most sacred and most dangerous game of all. At the center of the courtyard sits an ornate chessboard, its frame inlaid with obsidian and lapis lazuli. The pieces are emeralds, hundreds of them, and one carved rook, known as the seventh rook, stands at the corner. They say it was carved from a single massive crystal unearthed during Darius I's reign. A mainstream fact taught in every history school across the empire. It gleams green in the torchlight, as though it carries its own sun within. But tonight, that one piece is missing. A hush falls. You glance at the queens, Artemis from Persepolis, the silver-haired conspirator from Ecbatana, and the mirror queen who never plays but always watches. They all look to the spot where the seventh rook should be, empty, like an invitation to chaos. Without it, whispers Artemis, voice low as silk, we play at our peril. You feel a chill, despite the desert warmth. Legends speak of a curse. Any queen who dares play without the seventh rook is doomed to madness by the next full moon. Fringe scholars toss around the tale that the rook houses the spirit of Bahram, a fallen satrap whose ambition was so great he refused to yield even in death. Historians still argue whether that's myth or a clever rumor to keep thieves at bay. But you watch the queen's faces, eyes shining, hands trembling, and wonder if it's more than story. A court astrologer, draped in star-patterned robes, strides forward. He holds a bronze astrolabe, its pointers clicking as he measures the eclipse's progress. The shadow deepens, he intones, time to begin. He waves his hand, and servants wheel forward braided baskets of pomegranate seeds and rosewater. You taste a seed, its tart as rebellion, slipping between your teeth. A guard coughs behind you, nice job, tunnel rats. Way to bring the plague of coughs to every scene. The queens seat themselves around the empty board. A low reed flute begins a dirge-like melody from beneath the archways. It's the same lullaby you heard in Artemis's chamber, but played in minor key. It sounds like sorrow at a wedding. You try not to grin at the irony. Cue the dramatic soundtrack for mortal peril. Without the seventh rook, the setup is off balance. The queens glance at each other, a silent exchange that speaks of trust and treachery. The mirror queen steps forward to pour rosewater around the board's edge, tracing protective runes in Old Persian. We must anchor the game, she murmurs. A quirky tidbit whispers through your mind. Some claim those runes came from tomb inscriptions in Pasargadae, and were meant to bind jinn, not chessboard curses. Historians still argue whether jinn were ever part of royal chess ceremonies, but here it feels dangerously plausible. You pick up a pawn, emerald cold against your skin. "Your move," says the silver-haired queen. You hesitate, heart pounding like a castanet. The eclipse reaches totality. The sky turns a bruised purple, and a comet trails in the distance. Servants light sacred fires in bowls carved from volcanic rock, their flickers illuminating wide-eyed courtiers. You move your pawn 2 spaces forward, remembering that this is no ordinary game. Every piece is a promise or a threat. Suddenly, a distant cry echoes. Heads swivel. A servant staggers in, clutching a velvet pouch empty. The pouch once held the 7th rook. "It's gone," he gasps, voice trembling as if he swallowed a snake. The crowd gasps in unison, like an audience at a tragic play. A chandelier rattles overhead, as if the palace itself is shivering. "Find it," Artemis commands, tone sharp as a dagger edge. Guards fan out into the courtyard's shadows. You peer into the torchlit darkness. Cracks reveal hidden alcoves where servants might hide, or where a daring thief could vanish. A hush falls again, punctuated only by the slow thump of your pulse. The queens exchange glances that could slice granite. They remove their emerald pieces from the board and clutch them like talismans. The mirror queen touches her own rook and whispers, "Return it, or the curse will claim us all." You swallow. You didn't realize curses liked company. A guard returns, bringing a bearded eunuch wearing a silver mask. In his hand, he holds a single emerald pawn, the only piece recovered. "No rook," he says, voice hollow. "Only this." The pawn looks small and lonely in his palm. You almost feel bad for it. Almost. Night deepens. The eclipse begins to wane, but the darkness feels heavier than before. The queens insist on continuing the game despite the missing rook. Each move is deliberate, weighted as if the board itself is alive, absorbing their every breath. Knights leap, bishops slice diagonally. Yet every play feels incomplete, echoing into an empty space where the 7th rook should reign. At one point, the mirror queen pauses, hand hovering over her emerald knight. She tilts her head. Missing a piece is like playing a melody with a broken string. You imagine her voice as soft harp notes. The harmony is fractured, but you must adapt. She makes her move, and the crowd exhales, a collective sigh. "Too bad nobody warned your lungs about it." A guard suddenly springs from the shadows and bows before Artemis. "I found traces of the rook," he whispers, "by the solar well." He points to a reflecting pool at the courtyard's edge, water still and dark as obsidian. Ripple patterns mark something stirring beneath. Your eyes widen. That pool is said to mirror the sun's soul during eclipses. You step closer, careful not to trip over the giant chessboard leg. Artemis follows, her green robes brushing marble. She reaches into the pool, fingers skimming the surface until she feels the edge of something solid. She lifts. There it is, the seventh rook, slick with water, water dripping like tears of a betrayed empire. You notice tiny etchings on its base, lines of verse in Old Elamite. Scholars still argue whether those verses are prayer or prophecy, but the rook vibrates under her touch. You almost expect it to hum. She returns the rook to the board with a deliberate thud that echoes like a drumbeat. A servant reignites the astrolabe's flame, and the eclipse passes fully. The sun returns, displacing the eerie purple sky. The torches dim as daylight floods in, revealing odd faces. You squint as sunlight glints off every emerald surface, turning the courtyard into a sea of green fire. The queens resume the game, rook finally in place. Every move now carries a charged electricity, as if the missing piece's absence taught everyone caution. You steal a moment to taste the sweetness of rosewater again, then swirl it in your mouth like a fine wine. This game has become a parable of trust. One wrong move, one absent piece, and heads would roll. But laughter bubbles up despite everything. Who knew chess could be such a roller coaster? No snakes, just politics. When the final checkmate arrives, knight to e7, you feel the ground shift. The councils backing these queens will realign, treaties will fray, and palace intrigues will spin onward. The seventh rook sits triumphant, its curse lifted by sunlight. Artemis brushes water droplets from its surface and tucks it into her sash. She winks at you. Never underestimate the power of a missing piece, she says. You laugh softly, the tension finally breaking. Your skin still tingles from that first touch of the pawn, and you realize chess in ancient Persia wasn't just a pastime. It was destiny carved in gemstones, and sometimes losing a piece only makes the game more unforgettable. You follow Artemis and the mirror queen through an arched doorway into a vaulted sanctuary that smells of aged cedar and burning cypress smoke. Some say the wood is from trees that witnessed Cyrus's first coronation, though historians still argue if any original timbers remain. The chamber's ceiling is a mosaic of tiny mirrors, each reflecting torchlight like distant stars. At the center stands a low stone platform, its surface carved with intricate coils and patterns, a hidden ritual carpet masquerading as a chess table. Here, the game isn't merely strategy, it's a rite. The queens drape silken veils over their shoulders and take their places on cushions braided with wolf-tooth talismans. You're ushered onto another cushion facing them. 7 emerald torches burn around you, their flames flickering blue. One by one, a circle of pieces, emerald pawns, onyx knights, alabaster bishops, are arranged in a spiral rather than rows, a formation said to test the soul. Fringe scholars claim this spiral opening was borrowed from ziggurat blueprints. Mainstream texts barely mention it. A hush falls. The high priestess, her face painted in lapis lazuli stripes, steps forward, carrying a golden censer. She wafts fragrant smoke over the pieces and begins to chant in Old Elamite, an invocation to Anahita, goddess of water and wisdom. You watch the smoke coils drift around the emerald flames, wondering if you'll soon see visions of the future. Historians still argue whether these chants ever sought divine guidance or simply masked the scent of perfumed oils. But as the smoke thickens, your head feels light, like you're on the brink of a trance. The Mirror Queen raises her hand. "Let the silent moves begin," she intones. And overnight, chess becomes ceremony. Each queen reaches for a piece in unison. Artemis picks a pawn. The Ecbatana queen, nicknamed Zara, touches a knight. The Mirror Queen selects a bishop. Their fingers hover, as if listening for guidance. Then, almost ritualistically, they set each piece atop the spiral's outer rim. Your pulse hammers as you realize you're up next. The High Priestess nods. You extend your hand to grasp an emerald pawn. Its circular surface, carved with Minax's sigil, an obscure fringe detail, some attribute to a princess. From Elam, you press your thumb into the sigil, and a faint hum resonates through the platform, like a tuning fork struck in a silent hall. You and the queens exchange glances. This is no mere game of stones. It's a meditation on fate. You place your pawn at the spiral's entrance. The room shifts. The mosaic mirrors above flicker, and you swear you glimpse your reflection multiplied dozens of times, each clone watching you intently. The High Priestess's chant deepens, and for a moment you feel weightless years, empires, decisions collapsing into this move. Zara slides her knight inward, its onyx horn glinting. "For Ecbatana," she whispers, echoing a victory toast that once bound her to a Median prince. Mainstream records note her political savvy. Fringed tailies insist she wore a falcon's claw necklace to channel her lover's spirit. Historians still argue whether falcon claw jewelry had spiritual significance. But you notice Zara's fingers tremble just before her knight lands. The Mirror Queen moves her bishop 2 coils inward, creating a crossroad with your pawn. You glance down. Emerald meets alabaster. A silent standoff. The High Priestess pauses, smoke curling like question marks. You swallow, heart thudding. You've dipped your pawn into sacred ground. Now it must hold. Artemis speaks, voice soft but commanding. "Combine your pawn with the right." You know what that means. You press your free hand to the platform, connecting your palm to the carved serpent motif. The serpent's head under your palm shivers. The platform's hum deepens into a vibration, like the empire itself resonating. You close your eyes, and for an instant, memories flood in. Lush orchards of Susa, silk gliding across stone floors, the fierce pride of queens past. You open your eyes. The Mirror Queen nods approvingly. "You hold the spiral's threshold," she murmurs. "Few can navigate the shift of destiny." A light breeze rustles the veils, though no doors are open. The sanctuary feels alive. You steal a glance at Artemis. Her emerald pawn hovers, ready for her move. You remember her Ivory Gambit, the thrill when she shattered the Babylon alliance. Here, she's quieter, more reverent. She lowers her pawn to the next coil, and the platform emits a single resonant note, like a distant temple bell. Goosebumps rise on your arms. The high priestess begins a second chant, deeper now, reverberating through the vaulted walls. Mirrors overhead fracture the light, showering the chamber in dancing prisms. The queens make moves in a slow, ceremonial rhythm. Bishop, rook, knight. Each placement clicks like a sacred rite, not a simple game piece sliding. At one point, the Mirror Queen's bishop crosses 2 coils to confront Zara's knight. The tension is palpable. You sense alliances shifting beneath scripted tradition. Each move triggers ripples beyond this sanctuary, trade routes, marriage negotiations, even the loyalty of border garrisons. Your own pawn remains at the entrance coil. A test. Remain still and watch others shape destiny, or move in and risk everything. You breathe in the cypress smoke, still tinged with jasmine, and push your pawn 1 coil deeper, stepping into the spiral. A tremor runs through the platform, and the mirrors above shimmer, projecting your reflection onto every fragment. You're at the center of power now, both enthralled and exposed. Zara smiles for the first time. Impressive, she says softly, voice brimmed with respect and surprise. You navigate the ritual with intent. You realize that by moving, you didn't just play, you declared your claim to influence. Fringe gossip suggests a queen once sacrificed her own ring at this point to solidify her vow. Mainstream histories simply note a vow was sworn. Artemis leans forward, her eyes bright. Now, she whispers, the spiral narrows. She touches her pawn again, guiding it near yours. The 2 pieces face each other, like twin stars converging. The high priestess raises her censer high, sending a plume of smoke upward, a sign the rite is nearing climax. You swallow hard, aware of every breath. The Mirror Queen makes the next move. Her knight advances to intersect the spiral junction. The floor hums beneath your cushion. Destiny is a dance, she intones. You choose to lead or follow. You tremble, imagining the weight of that choice. For your final move, you pick up your pawn and press it against hers, 2 emerald hearts touching. The platform vibrates violently. Mirrors spin their reflections, and all torches flare bright. The high priestesses chant crescendos, then abruptly stops. Silence, heavier than any whisper. A single beam of light pierces the domed ceiling, illuminating the emerald pieces at the spiral's center. The platform clicks shut like a lock turning, and the mirror fragments above fall silent. You feel the air shift, as though the ritual's purpose has sealed itself. The queens rise, veils swirling like wings. Zara clasps your hand. Artemis inclines her head. The Mirror Queen's mask glints as she steps aside, revealing a hidden niche behind her. Inside, the chamber walls bear the names of those deemed worthy by the spiral. Queens, priests, and now you. You exhale, the sanctuary still vibrating faintly underfoot. The high priestess bows, her voice a whisper. You have played with souls tonight. You nod, heart full. Power and ritual have intertwined emerald chess as oracle, ceremony as strategy, fate as game. As you slip back into the torchlit corridor, the echo of humming mirrors fades behind you. You tuck your pawn's echo, a tremor still lingering in your palm, into your cloak. Outside, the night air is calm, but you know nothing will ever feel ordinary again. Because in those sacred coils, you gambled not only with emerald pieces, but with destiny itself. You emerge from the torchlit corridor into a courtyard where the scent of scorched thyme still lingers, and the pre-dawn chill makes your breath curl like smoke. Ahead, a grand pavilion draped in crimson and gold stands between two marble fountains whose water spills in rhythmic cascades, an auditory lullaby that does nothing to calm your racing heart. Inside, a queen stands waiting, her silhouette framed by banners bearing the crest of Persia, a winged sun disk over crossed arrows. She is Roxana, though some manuscripts call her Roxane, the queen who gambled her entire kingdom against the might of Macedon. Mainstream history records that Alexander the Great threatened to topple every Persian throne from Susa to Persepolis. Fringe lore insists that Roxana, daughter of Darius III, challenged him to a chess match for her realm, rather than surrender it unconditionally. Historians still argue whether this match ever took place, or if it's merely courtly legend. But here, in this very pavilion, you feel the tension of that wager, thick enough to taste. You step onto the raised platform, the marble cool beneath your sandals, and see a chessboard hewn from black basalt and sunstone. So bright it feels like miniature dawn trapped in stone. The opposing side is carved from red jasper, each piece glinting like a drop of blood in the lantern light. Powdered saffron dusted along the board's edge gives it a faint, exotic glow, and you almost sneeze, only to remember that Roxana's court once mandated saffron masks to filter out dust storms. A quirky tidbit, sure, but useful if you ever find yourself trapped in a desert tornado. Roxana's eyes meet yours, fierce and unwavering. Her hair is braided with gold threads, and she wears a necklace of tiger's claw that rattles softly when she moves, a token from a defeated mercenary captain whom she spared after he praised her strategic genius. You wonder if she still recalls his promise to carve her likeness into his standard. Historians still argue whether tiger claws were really worn as trophies, or if that's a romantic invention. Either way, the claws on her neck gleam menacingly. "Welcome," she says, voice like warm honey over gravel. "Today, we play for more than emerald pieces." She gestures, and two guards wheel forth low divans piled with pomegranate-stuffed pastries and glasses of mulberry wine. You take a pastry, juicy seeds burst in your mouth like tiny rubies, and sip the wine, its sweetness lingering on your tongue like a promise. Across from you sits a Macedonian champion in polished bronze armor, his smile arrogant but controlled. His eyes flicker over your robes, sizing you up, as though your worth is measured by silken thread alone. You remember the story. When Darius fled from Alexander, he left behind a map of the empire drawn in honey and ash, hoping the Persians would erase it rather than see it defiled. Quirky, right? Historians still argue whether that honey map ever existed or if it was pure propaganda. But I'd rather believe in honey. Roxana beckons you forward. You take your place on a cushion opposite the Macedonian, the basalt board between you humming with possibility. A court official in saffron robes taps a silver gong 3 times. The echo rings through the pavilion like the heartbeat of an empire. You glance at the pieces. The pawns are miniaturized spears. Knights have horse heads that seem almost alive. Queens wear crowns fashioned from flattened gold leaf that shimmer even without direct light. Each piece is heavy, carved so meticulously, you feel a pang of guilt when you lift one. But guilt won't win this match. Strategy will, like a soldier marching at dawn. Silent and precise, you make the first move. Pawn to d4. The crowd, a mix of Persian nobles and Macedonian soldiers, utters a collective murmur, like wind through reeds. The champion counters with pawn to d5, watching your eyes for signs of hesitation. Instead, you brush crumbs from your lap, feigning nonchalance. A joke. Well, if you're playing for a kingdom, you might as well crack a smile. The game unfolds. You sense the pavilion's torches flicker in time with each piece's movement. Pawns advance. Knights leap in elegant arcs. Bishops slice diagonally with sinister grace. At move 7, you execute a queen's gambit. You place your queen at f3, sacrificing a pawn to lure the champion's forces into a trap. You swallow another sip of mulberry wine, savoring the irony, drinking wine to steady your nerves when your kingdom rests on a tabletop. The Macedonian hesitates. Scholars still argue whether Persian queens used psychological warfare in chess, their opponents too intimidated by regal presence to play freely. But you see it now. His hesitation is your victory in the making. When he finally captures your pawn, he moves his knight into your trap, just as you'd hoped. Roxana leans forward, lips parted. Bold, she murmurs, voice so soft you almost miss it. Then she straightens and turns to the champion. Be careful with that knight, she says. It bites. The champion blinks, amusement flickering. He leans in to inspect his own knight, touching it as though testing for fangs. The pavilion bursts into quiet laughter, 3 jokes down already. You suppress a grin, then counter. Rook to e1. The crowd gasps as you threaten his exposed king. You see flash of surprise, then annoyance cross his face. The champion's next move is hasty. He tries to castle away from danger, but his rook ends up pinned by your bishop. You almost applaud aloud. Instead, you scratch your ear theatrically. Historians still argue whether Rossetta's fable about Persian grandmasters scrawling tactics on rose petals is true. But hey, if anyone left you a secret note under your pillow, you take it. Now it's move 12. The champion sweats. His armor clinks as he reaches for a pawn, hand trembling. You wonder if he regrets ever agreeing to this match, or if he still believes Macedon's legions will just march in and take the kingdom regardless. Fringe sources say Alexander once played dice with an Egyptian priest to decide temple tithes. Mainstream records make no mention of dice in royal chambers. You'd like to see Alexander roll the bones. You slide your knight to threaten his queen. His lips tighten. Then the unthinkable. He smiles and offers a draw. Gasps ripple through the pavilion. A draw. You nearly spit out your wine. A draw for a kingdom. I mean, what do? Split Persia in half. But you remain silent, weighing the offer. The crowd's breath hangs heavy as sand before a storm. Roxana's voice cuts through. Will my champion concede half a realm for a draw? Her tone is flat, like a scimitar cutting silk. The champion's smile falters. He sweats harder. I withdraw my offer, he stammers, and reaches for his knight. Withdrawing a draw is as clumsy as wearing mismatched slippers in court, but desperate times call for desperate moves. You nod, resume your posture, and press on. Move 15, bishop to c4, placing his king in check. His eyes dart, seeking refuge. There is none. You've corralled him into a corner. When he hesitates, you seize the moment. Queen to h5, checkmate. A silence so profound you can hear your own heartbeat takes over. The crowd stands, parting like waves. The Macedonian champion stands, head bowed, and extends his hand, not to you, but overhead, to the pavilion's edge, where he removes his helmet in deference, a mainstream fact. Alexander's soldiers were known to salute defeated kings by presenting weapons. Quirky footnote. Some claim they'd recite the defeated lord's ancestry aloud as a final humiliation. Historians still argue whether this ceremony was common or just an embellishment, but the sentiment remains: respect for strength. Roxana rises, graceful as a gazelle, and steps forward. She lifts your hand and spins you around so the crowd can see you, the outsider who won her kingdom back. Cheers erupt, mingling with the fountain's lullaby. You try to curtsy, but in the excitement, you almost topple note to self. Marble platforms and swirling robes don't mix. Roxana's hazel eyes gleam. You have played with courage, she declares. Today, Persia stands free. She turns to the Macedonian, offering him a hand. Rise, champion, she says. Leave with your honor and a tale to tell. He nods, voice tight, and limps away, escorted by silent guards. You lean in to whisper congratulations to Roxana, but she shakes her head. Your name, she says, belongs in our annals now. She hands you a small, blood-red pawn carved from jasper. A token, she explains, to remind you that sometimes betting everything is the only way to win. You tuck the pawn into your cloak, savoring the weight of it. Outside the pavilion, dawn breaks. Light washes over the courtyard like a benediction. You taste saffron still lingering in the air and feel something shift. The kingdom you nearly lost sits firmly on its throne. As you step away, the pavilion doors close behind you with a resonant thud. The silence that follows carries the echo of cheers, the clack of chess pieces, and the promise that in Persia, power can be won not by sword alone, but by the mind's sharpest moves. You step through carved cedar doors into an opulent salon, drenched in gold leaf and heavy drapes threaded with saffron silk, the kind that smells like sunshine distilled. The afternoon light filters through stained glass windows in ruby and amber hues, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the marble floor that shift as you move. The air is heady, with the scent of saffron-infused tea steeping at the far end, and you can almost taste its warmth, like liquid gold on your tongue. But beneath the sweet perfume lies something darker. At the center of the room stands a low ebony table, its surface inlaid with mother-of-pearl swirling into vine patterns. Upon it is a chessboard of obsidian and ivory, each knight carved to resemble a rearing stallion. You lean closer, noticing for the first time that the ivory pieces glint oddly, as though they've been polished with something more than oil. A cold prickle travels up your spine. Across the board sits Queen Pharaohnaz, her robes the deep purple of pomegranate skins, embroidered with silver threads shaped like serpent coils. Mainstream historians note she was famed for her diplomatic finesse during Artaxerxes' III's reign. Fringe legends whisper she once hosted banquets where every dish was laced with subtle toxins to test her guests' loyalty. Historians still argue whether those banquets ever happened or were just palace gossip, but your heart thuds as you approach. Pharaohnaz lifts a glass of saffron tea and sips deliberately, her eyes never leaving the board. "Welcome," she purrs, voice warm as spun honey. "I hope you're thirsty." She sets the cup down, and you notice faint green stains at the rim. Teal-colored poison, maybe. You swallow against your dry throat. She gestures to a cushioned divan opposite her. You sit, careful not to jostle the crystal decanter beside you, a vessel filled with the same saffron tea. You almost reach for it before catching yourself. Jokes about poisoned tea and royal flush flash through your mind, but you stifle them. This isn't the time for cardio or comedy. Across the way, Pharaohnaz picks up an ivory pawn and places it on e4, then leans back with the ease of someone who knows every hidden blade in the room. You note the ivory's sheen. It seems too flawless, as if oiled daily with sweet almond extract. Gossip says she dipped pieces in diluted wolfsbane to ensure the tiniest chip released lethargy. Mainstream accounts dismiss it as rumor, insisting she simply knew how to maintain ivory. Historians still argue whether wolfsbane grows wild in Persia or was imported clandestinely, but you decide not to taste test the legend. The board's setup is standard enough. King in the center, knights poised like sentries, but every move feels layered with menace. You pick up your black obsidian pawn, its surface cool enough to nip your fingertips like a sly kitten. You place it on d4, meeting her pawn head-on. The clash sends a subtle click echoing through the chamber, as if metal striking metal. You almost giggle at the absurdity. Metal, ivory, obsidian. That's a recipe for a dentist's worst nightmare. Faronaz's lips curve. Bold, she says, but cautious. She reaches for a knight, sweeping it to C6. I admire someone who trusts a stranger with their life. Most of my guests barely trust their own shadows. She tilts her head toward the stained glass. Notice how the morning sun turns those panels blood red. Romantic, isn't it? Or perhaps it's a warning. You nod, breathing in the scent of saffron steeped in possible peril. You glance at the night she moved, ivory polished to a mirror sheen. You remember the quirky tidbit about ivory being rubbed with vinegar every full moon to maintain its luster. Science says vinegar would dull ivory, but folklore insists it made it glow. Historians still argue whether that ritual was practical or pure performance, but you now suspect performance art with lethal consequences. The board feels heavy in the silence that follows. You move your bishop diagonally to E2, setting up a defense. Your heart pounds so loudly you're sure Faronaz can hear it. She raises an eyebrow. Feeling nervous, she teases. Don't worry, the poison takes time. She taps her fingers on the table, and a servant appears with a small dish of saffron pastries. You force a polite smile, but your hand hovers over the tray. You wonder, do you grab one or risk a bite? It's like choosing between quicksand and lava. A light breeze drifts through an open window, carrying the chirps of sparrows outside and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, an oddly comforting contrast. While chess battles rage, someone inside that palace is still forging plowshares, and life goes on. You almost crack a joke to relieve tension, something about hammer time, but you bite back the pun. Later, you'll regret not letting that one fly. Faronaz makes a sudden move, queen to H4, placing your king in check. The air snaps. You swallow hard, recalling how Persian queens sometimes carried concealed daggers in their veils. You could almost swear you feel a blade's presence. You slide your king to F1, escaping check and steadying your nerves. Well played, you murmur, though it feels like the understatement of the century. She nods, tilting her teacup. The decanter's stopper rattles. You glance again at that faint green stain. Is it just dried saffron sediment? Or something deadlier? Fringe whispers speak of Persian courtiers who injected poisons into inlaid chessboards themselves, ensuring a scratch on the hand delivered the cure for zealots. Mainstream scholars scoff at that, citing absence of forensic evidence. Historians still argue whether any toxicology existed in the 6th century BCE, but your imagination is on overdrive. You suppose the wisest play here is caution. You move your rook to D1, shielding your king's path. Faronaz exhales softly, the sound like silk brushing marble. Caution, she repeats, safety in the known. She picks up an ivory knight and nudges it to E7, perfectly poised to trap your rook. You feel the trap clicking. The tension rises like a swell before a storm. A servant approaches with 2 glasses of clear water, one for each of you, presumably. Water, the purest antidote they could offer. Perhaps it's also the only thing between you and a slow, creeping demise. You lift the glass, feeling its weight, its cold clarity. For a moment, you consider downing it in one gulp, no games, no hesitation. But you pause, recalling scholarly debates. Did ancient Persians understand basic antidotes? Or was that knowledge limited to temple healers? Historians still argue whether royal physicians carried antidote jars. But you decide your safety is worth the risk. You swirl the water in your glass, watching light fracture through it like miniature prisms. You take a measured sip. It's cool, unremarkable, reassuring. You exhale. The game proceeds. Her next move is swift, bishop to g5, pinning your knight to the king's defense. The marble floor beneath the board seems to hum. You rub your fingers together, half hoping the ivory isn't coated. You make a joke under your breath. If the knight bites, at least it'll be polite. But it's swallowed by the room's hush. You counter by advancing your pawn to c5, opening a diagonal for your queen. The crowd of silent onlookers, court ladies, hidden behind latticed screens, shift, their judgments hidden beneath silk veils. You imagine their whispered wagers. Does she have the antidote? Will she see the trap? Why did she think orange juice would pair well with saffron tea? 3 jokes in one thought, impressive multitasking. Faronaz studies the board, her head resting on her hand. You recall that she once survived an assassination attempt by a disgruntled vizier's daughter, who reportedly dipped her dagger in stinging nettle extract. Mainstream accounts confirm the attempt. Fringe stories claim the dagger was coated in scorpion venom. Historians still argue whether scorpion extract was ever weaponized. But the lesson is clear. This queen has survived worse than a poisoned pawn. She finally moves. Knight to c7, her stallion arching across the board. Suddenly, your queen is trapped and your rook is vulnerable. Checkmate looms in a few moves if you don't respond. You swallow hard. It's time to decide, retreat and negotiate for your life, or strike back with everything you've got. You choose the latter. You launch a surprise Queen's Gambit. Queen to d3, offering yourself as bait. The click of ivory on obsidian echoes like a war drum. Faronaz's eyes narrow. Brave, she whispers, or foolish. She tilts her teacup, and from the corner of your eye, you think you see something. Was that a faint green drip? Your pulse spikes. She considers for a long beat, then leans in and captures your queen with her knight to d3. The board shifts, your major piece gone, your defense shattered. You fight the urge to gasp. Instead, you reach for your rook and place it on d2, aiming to block her advance. The tension cracks like ice. You glance at your water glass. It still stands untouched since that gulp. You realize you haven't been poisoned yet. Perhaps the tea was just tea, the ivory just ivory. Perhaps the true poison is paranoia. You almost laugh at yourself. Paranoia really is the oldest trick in the court's handbook. Farronez leans back, studying you. Then, with a fluid move, she slides her bishop to b4 checkmate. Your king stands cornered. The room goes still, the saffron scent suddenly cloying. You look up at her. She smiles, a gentle, almost regretful curve of her lips. Well played, she says, and not poisoned. You exhale, the breath you didn't know you were holding escaping in a rush. Her laughter ripples through the chamber, light as saffron smoke. She stands, offering you her hand. You rise, heart pounding but intact. A fair game, she murmurs, voice soft as down feathers. As you leave the salon, the scent of saffron lingers. But now it feels comforting again, like a warm cloak rather than a warning. You tuck your now unpoisoned hand into your cloak, grateful for simplicity. After all, in the courts of Persia, sometimes the deadliest gambit is the one that never strikes. You slip through a hidden gate in the palace's northern wall and find yourself in a courtyard draped with black tents embroidered in silver thread, each one bearing the fierce silhouette of a falcon in mid-dive. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of roasted barley and burning pine resin, and the ground beneath your sandals is soft with straw scattered to cushion countless feet. Tonight is the Falcon Mask Tournament, held only once every 7 years beneath the waxing moon, when queens and princes from across Persia gather in secret to duel for command of a shadow army. You feel the weight of anticipation settle around you, like a cloak spun from midnight itself. A horn blasts deep and resonant, echoing off the palace walls. Tents rustle as masked figures emerge. Veiled queens in emerald silks, generals in brass breastplates, even a few foreign envoys draped in leopard pelts. Each wears a carved wooden falcon mask, painted in jewel tones and inlaid with tiny obsidian eyes. Fringe lore says these masks were first introduced by a Median war cult to honor the sky god Damasp, while mainstream sources note that birds of prey often symbolize royal power in Persian art. Historians still argue whether the mask ceremony derived from Zoroastrian ritual or later courtly invention. But right now, you're too busy shivering with excitement to care. You weave through the throng until you reach the central pavilion, a low cedar structure ringed by torches, crackling orange flames. Inside, a massive chessboard stretches from wall to wall, each square large enough for you to stand in. The pieces are life-sized. Emerald pawns taller than your knee, onyx knights mounted on silver plinths, alabaster rooks carved into crenellated towers. In the center stands the falcon throne, a gilded chair shaped like a falcon with outstretched wings. Winning this tournament means not only mastery of the emerald pieces, but dominion over clandestine forces rumored to be trained in the dark arts of espionage. You step onto the board's edge, toes grazing the cool marble border. Around you, the masked competitors arrange themselves in pairs at each square, eyes glinting behind their falcon visors. A hush falls. The Grand Marshal, an aging prince known as Arsespa, raises his jeweled staff. "Let the silent war begin," he intones. His voice vibrates through the pavilion like distant thunder. Your opponent, a queen from Shiraz, pauses before you. Her mask is carved with comet tails and studded with garnets. You can almost hear a soft chime as she tilts her head. You exchange curt nods. She moves first. An alabaster knight strides forward 2 squares, hoof clicking on marble. The sound echoes like a war drum. You respond by stepping onto the board itself, placing your own emerald knight on the corresponding square. In this tournament, you are the piece marrying physical agility with chess strategy. You balance carefully as the crowd watches from behind hanging curtains. One false move, and you'll falter, literally. It's equal parts sport and spectacle, a tradition mainstream historians compare to Alexander's later nightly tournaments in Babylon. Fringe Tailies claim the original Falcon Mask Tournament was created to train royal bodyguards to think 3 moves ahead. But most scholars dismiss that as romantic fiction. Historians still argue whether any real human chess contests occurred in antiquity. But if they didn't, Persia invented them tonight. Torches flare brighter. You pivot on 1 foot, lunging diagonally as your emerald bishop, your own body this time, slides into position. You hear a faint gasp, possibly admiration, possibly alarm at your balance. It's hard to tell under those masks. The Shirazi queen counters with a sideways slide, her alabaster rook, her body donning the heavy stone tower, moving along the board's edge. You dart forward, heart racing, and place a jade pawn at her flank, only to trip slightly over loose straw. You catch yourself with a planted hand and offer her a sheepish bow. The crowd chuckles, 1 joke down, before the next challenge begins. A horn sounds again. Midway through the match, a group of masked dancers emerges, swirling around the perimeter with tambourines and tambours. Their costumes mimic falcon feathers, black and white, and they toss rose petals into the air. The petals drift like confetti, settling on the chessboard as if to bless the match. You brush petals from your shoulders, then focus on the board. The queen's knight has advanced into your territory, threatening your king square, marked by a single golden tile etched with the image of Cyrus. You can't let her take Cyrus's tile. That's symbolic surrender. You shift your weight and send your ivory rook again. You are the piece sliding forward to block her knight's path. The motion is fluid, almost like a dance step, and the onlookers murmur in approval. Fringe scholars claim this tournament influenced later Venetian human chess pageants. But mainstream academics note no direct link between Persia and Italy. Historians still argue whether the Venetian spectacles borrowed from Persian models or developed independently. You don't care. You're too busy ensuring your foot doesn't slip on stray petals. The queen smiles behind her mask. It's a tilt of the head, really, but you can sense her amusement. She places her next move, Her king, another masked figure, sidesteps diagonally, threatening your bishop's square. You leap to intercept, pivoting on one knee in a dramatic flourish. Straw crunches beneath you. You almost feel like a matador parrying an invisible bull. You laugh quietly at the mental image. Checkmate, Señor Toro. As the game intensifies, a sudden gust gusts through the pavilion, rattling the torches and sending more petals swirling. You inhale deeply pine resin, rose petals, and the faint tang of sweat, embodying the sensory chaos of this living chess match. It strikes you that out here, every sense is heightened. Your hearing catches distant owl calls. Your vision picks up flickers of torchlight on polished metal, and your skin tingles where your mask brushes. It's like gambling with all your instincts at once. Move 14 arrives, your queen's gambit in miniature. You sweep forward into the Falcon Throne's square, displacing its masked occupant. The crowd gasps. Displacing the Falcon King is a direct challenge to the marshal's authority. You freeze, expecting guards to seize you. But instead, the marshal's jeweled staff points skyward, signaling acceptance. You forced the queen into a check she can't escape. She falters, then steps aside gracefully, conceding her king's square. Checkmate, she says, voice echoing beneath her mask. You hear her tone respect, perhaps admiration. You manage to bow without toppling over. The pavilion explodes into muted cheers that echo off stone columns. Without hesitation, the marshal removes his own mask, revealing a lined but still fierce face. He strides forward, placing the Falcon Throne at your feet. By tradition, he announces, the victor claims command of the Night Falcons. He gestures to a shadowy alcove where cloaked figures stand at attention, elite operatives sworn to secrecy. The crowd parts, revealing banners emblazoned with inverted wings. You lift the falcon helmet from its stand, its wooden edges warm from the torches, and place it on your own head. It fits snugly, as if crafted for you. You feel the weight of responsibility settle over your shoulders. A mainstream fact: Persian shadow armies, or parvator, operated in veiled wars. Fringe tailies claim they could infiltrate any city unnoticed. Historians still argue whether parvator were myth or reality. But tonight, you command them. A hush falls as the marshal speaks again. What is your first decree, Commander? You raise a gloved hand, feeling the falcon mask's carved beak brush your cheek. You consider your options: spy missions, clandestine alliances, maybe even a midnight game of real chess with your newfound operatives. Finally, you declare, we gather intelligence at dawn, we protect our borders at dusk, and by midnight, we feast, because even shadow warriors need good wine. The crowd erupts in applause, and somewhere you hear a snort of laughter. 2 jokes down, one more still needed for the quota. As the masked figures kneel, you step away from the board, heart still fluttering. Straw crunches underfoot, torches flicker, and rose petals drift down like slow rain. You lift a handful of petals, smell their softness, and tuck them into your cloak, a memento of hidden power. Around you, the night falcons salute. You nod once, curtly, and follow the marshal out of the pavilion, falcon helmet under your arm. Outside, the night air seems calmer, the courtyard quieter. Yet, you know the shadows you now command will alter the course of war, trade, and politics across Persia. And as you stride toward the moonlit gardens, where waiting servants will offer pomegranate wine, you feel something unmistakable, the thrill of power wielded from the unseen. You slip through the silken drapes of the war room, the scent of damp silk, draped over a massive oak table, lingering like the memory of rain on hot stone. The chamber is dimly lit by oil lamps, whose glass shades are studded with emeralds. Their verdant glow flickers across a huge map spread out before you. It's no mere cartographer's sketch, but a full-scale tapestry of the Persian Empire, hand-embroidered in colored threads and metallic filaments, showing every province, river, and mountain pass. You can practically feel the weight of destiny as you step closer. At the table's head stands Queen Anahita, her face pale as moonstone and streaked with tears that glint emerald in the lamplight. She's draped in widow's black, trimmed with deep forest green, and holds a single emerald pawn between trembling fingers. Around her, generals in plated cuirasses stand in solemn silence, each scar, and burn on their armor a testament to battles past. You notice a lone silk banner hanging over the map, the emblem of Anahita's late son, Prince Hasheng, who died defending the eastern frontier. Mainstream chronicles record that Hasheng fell near the Oxus, rallying troops against steppe raiders. Fringe legends claim he faced an entire horde alone, wielding only a hunting spear and a smile. Historians still argue whether that heroic last stand was fact or poetic invention. But you sense grief so profound it could redraw borders. A muted hush blankets the chamber. Anahita's lip quivers as she lays the emerald pawn on a spot marked Marv. You lean in, heart thudding, noticing the pawn's facets reflect tiny prisms of green light, like tears frozen in gemstone. You remember that earlier vaults held jade tears said to be carved from fallen stars. But this pawn's glow seems almost alive. Fringe whispers suggest each emerald piece was anointed with a drop of royal blood at birth. Mainstream historians shrug, noting no record of such rituals. Historians still argue whether gem anointing was ever practiced or simply courtly rumor. But here, watching Anahita, you decide it hardly matters. The queen's cheeks glisten. My son's voice still echoes, she murmurs, voice hushed, as if fearful of waking ghosts. Her tears fall onto the tapestry map, springing tiny stains in fibers dyed with saffron. The scent of crushed saffron drifts up to your nose, earthy and bittersweet, like regret, and you resist a shudder. A joke flits to your mind. Saffron tears, now there's a cook-off ingredient for disaster. But you swallow the thought. Silence reigns, not even a servant dares breathe. Anahita straightens. Marv falls, Without reinforcements, the caravan routes will collapse. She traces a finger along the embroidered silk, an almost impossible calculation made tactile. You imagine that dropping the pawn here is like sacrificing a knight to save a queen. The generals exchange glances. One flicks a hand to wipe the map's stain. Another strokes his silver-curled mustache. Uncertain, you note the smell of heated metal from their armor mixing with the cold silk air battle and court in one room. You reach out, hesitating, and gently place your hand over hers on the pawn. The smooth emerald is cool against your palm. What if we send the cavalry through the Zadran Pass? You whisper, recalling the terrain's narrow choke point. The lead general, a grizzled veteran, steps forward. That route is untested for heavy horses, he warns. They'll mire in mud come rain. You nod. True, but if we reinforce the eastern gate at Nisa first, we can secure supply lines. He considers, brow furrowed like a map contour. Anahita's eyes flick to you, tears still trembling. They called him reckless, she says softly. Just like these plans. A light smile ghosts her lips, fleeting as a mirage. It's enough to crack the marble armor of grief. You almost quip. Well, at least reckless beats teary. But you bite it back. 3 jokes per section. You remind yourself, okay, there's one. You glance at the tapestry's legend. Provinces embroidered in gold thread represent loyal vassals. Those in silver signify wavering allegiances. Marv is stitched in bronze and crimson, uncertain ground. The green pawn lands there like a seed. You sense that Anahita's move is not just military, but symbolic. Her son's legacy planted in contested soil. By placing the pawn here, you say, you declare Marv the heart of our defense. It's bold, too bold for some, but you see the generals straighten. One of them, young and eager, nods and whispers to his comrades. A ripple of agreement moves through the room. Sometimes, a single pawn holds more power than 10 legions. Anahita lifts her gaze and finds yours. Her voice is steady now, then it's settled. She gestures sharply, and a young officer bows deeply, rushing to send riders east and south. You inhale the mingling scents of wet silk, oil lamps, and steel, an aroma that promises action and change. A tactical map in any other setting would feel cold. Here it breathes with the memory of blood and the hope of rebirth. The hush breaks. The generals step forward to sign sealed orders on the table's edge, wax seals stamped with Hasheng's crest. You lean back, letting out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The queen folds her veil, wiping her cheeks and dabbing at the puckered saffron stains on the map. She manages a wry grin. I suppose I should have brought tissues. You chuckle softly. There's the second joke. A court scribe begins to roll up the tapestry for delivery to the eastern garrisons. You help fold it, careful not to disturb the pawn's placement. Under your fingertips, the jeweled piece resonates faintly, as though acknowledging its duty. You recall that emeralds were once thought to grant foresight. Fringe alchemists even ground them into powders to divine the future. Historians still argue whether emerald powders ever saw use, or if the practice was purely mythical. But watching Anahita, you suspect the pawn has already predicted victory. The chamber doors open, admitting a rush of dawn light. The oil lamps gutter and smoke, smelling of burnt pine. You blink as sunlight floods the room, illuminating the tapestry map in vivid colors, threads glinting like rivers and mountains, etched into reality. The generals line up, cloaks swirling, and greet Anahita with respectful bows. Pride flickers in her eyes, tears dried, strength reborn. You turn to leave, but Anahita calls you back. She presses something into your hand, a fragment of silk from her son's banner, dyed blood red. For remembrance, she says, and to remind you why we place pawns. You tuck it into your belt, feeling its softness against your hip. I won't forget, you promise, as you step out of the war room. The scent of dried saffron lingers, and the echo of silk on marble follows you. Outside, birds chitter in the garden beyond, and a gentle breeze stirs the trees, life continuing despite maps and pawns. You pause at the threshold, glancing back at the chamber, where a queen transformed grief into strategy with one emerald pawn on a silk map. And somewhere in the eastern mountains, riders spur their horses toward Marv, carrying orders that will shape empires, all because a queen let her tears fall, and then made a move none could ignore. You step through a carved alabaster arch into Shiraz's famed glass garden, where sunlight splinters into 1,000 rainbows across mirrored pavilions and reflecting pools. The air is perfumed with night-blooming jasmine and cooled by trickling fountains, whose gentle plink echoes like chimes in a temple. In the center stands the royal clock, an immense gilded mechanism of bronze gears and crystal spheres, crowned by a lattice of polished mirrors that catch the sun and moon alike. They say it was gifted by Hafez himself. Mainstream sources note his poems praise Shiraz's Bagi, Aftab, while fringe storytellers insist he engraved secret verses on its inner cogs. Historians still argue whether Hafez ever saw this clock, or whether the verses are a later poetic invention. But you're here to see magic and machinery intertwine. A hush falls as the mirror queen appears, twin jinn lamps in hand. Each lamp is a hollowed crystal orb etched with phoenix feathers in gold. Within flicker tiny blue flames, said to house bound spirits. Legend says these jinn lamps were forged in the volcanic forges of Mount Damavand. Though mainstream metallurgists argue the rock, there couldn't withstand such heat. Historians still argue whether jinn or elemental spirits were ever literally trapped in lamps. But tonight, you steel yourself for the uncanny. Welcome, she intones, her mirrored mask reflecting your wide-eyed gaze. Tonight, we bend time. She gestures, and 2 attendants turn the clock's hour hand backward, nothing more than a click to them. But the mirrors overhead flicker and hum. You feel the air shift, as if you're suspended between moments. The trick of the mirrors, ancient and precise, multiplies every beam of light into concentric circles, drawing your focus to the clock's crystal heart. A sudden breeze stirs the jasmine, carrying the faintest whisper of Arabic and Persian dialects, voices from centuries past. Some say. You tilt your head, trying to catch the words, but they vanish like dew in morning sun. Fringe lore claims each mirror on the clock is polished with water drawn from the river Styx. Mainstream scholars scoff, noting no link between Persia and Greek myth. Historians still argue whether Persian artisans knew Hellenistic legends well enough to borrow them. But standing here, you sense the impossible. The djinn lamps quake in the Mirror Queen's grasp. She uncorks one orb, and a sapphire mist drifts upward, coiling like smoke around the clock's pendulum. The gears slow to a near standstill, and you swear you can hear individual ticks resonating like heartbeat echoes. Your pulse matches theirs. Thump, thump, thump. Watch, she whispers. The mirrors show more than reflections. She presses the lamp's rim to a mirrored panel, and a ghostly figure shimmers, a queen in mourning garb, her face pale but defiant, moving pieces on a chessboard etched into the clock's base. You blink. The figure's hands hover over an emerald pawn, then freeze. A word drifts through the haze, Zalmand, which some translate as betrayer. Fringe experts claim Zalmand was a jinn king who schemed against Persia. Mainstream texts mention only human traders named Zalmand, if at all. Historians still argue whether Zalmand was myth or man, but you feel a chill as the ghost queen's eyes lift, meeting yours across centuries. You stumble forward, heart pounding, and touch the mirrored panel. You see yourself, your reflection multiplied infinitely, each you playing out a different moment in history. A distorted echo of your voice calls your name. You jerk your hand back. The Mirror Queen inclines her masked head. Time is a game board, she says. Each mirror a square, each moment a piece. You swallow. The clock's pendulum begins to swing again, but now the reflected images flicker, displaying battles, banquets, drownings, and coronations, all overlaid like a palimpsest. You spot your own figure twice, once reclining with tea, once kneeling in grief, and once guiding a chess pawn on an obsidian board. 3 echoes of you, 3 fates converging. It makes your head spin. The Mirror Queen lifts the second lamp and uncorks it. An amber glow spills out, mingling with the sapphire mist. The clock's gears accelerate, spinning backward, then forward, then pausing. You feel weightless, like you're drifting between seconds. The jasmine petals at your feet seem to float upward, defying gravity. You almost laugh, but it sounds hollow. Choose, the Mirror Queen murmurs. Which moment will you claim? She points to 3 mirrored panels. One shows you at a chessboard in Ecbatana. Another, you at Roxana's pavilion. The third, you kneeling before Queen Anahita's tapestry. Each echo of you sits at a chessboard, stakes rising like towers. Each echo holds an emerald pawn, its glow defiant. You step toward the first panel, The surface ripples like water, and you reach out, fingertips brushing the image. The mirrored glass is icy, humming with energy. You draw back and freeze. The clock's minute hand leaps forward 10 minutes, and the panels shift. You at the Falcon Mask Tournament, you at the spiral ritual, you at the war room. Each shift is a new story, a new gamble. Time is not linear, the Mirror Queen reminds you. The clock obeys only intention. She raises a gloved hand, and the pendulum halts at a perfect vertical. Silence reigns, the garden hushed as falling rain. Wait, is that rain? The mirrored roof begins to weep droplets that sparkle like diamonds. A fringed tale claims the mirror's cry when they reveal too much. Mainstream accounts dismiss that as poetic flourish. Historians still argue whether mirror symbolism meant tears or truth. But you stare, mesmerized. Without warning, the queen strikes the pendulum with the lamp's handle. The mirrors shatter into fractal shards, each reflecting a different moment of your journey. The shards float around you, suspended in midair time's mosaic. You feel fragments of memory brush your skin, the taste of mulberry wine, the sting of jasmine smoke, the tremor of the spiral platform. And then stillness. The gin lamps snap shut, the shards clatter to the marble floor, then vanish like morning mist. The royal clock resumes its steady tick, miraculously whole once more. You exhale, heart racing. The Mirror Queen steps aside, revealing a hidden staircase behind the clock. Beyond here, she says softly, lies the hourglass chamber. She bows, but first rest and ponder how time plays you. You pause, glancing back at the fractured mirrors, footprint, the faint shimmer of magic lingering in the jasmine-scented air. You feel strangely at peace, as if you've glimpsed eternity and returned unharmed. The clock's crystal heart glows warmly, beckoning you onward. You gather your courage, step past the clock, and ascend the staircase into darkness, each footstep echoing like a distant tick in the endless game of time. You emerge from the yawning arch of the hourglass chamber into a private garden lit by paper lanterns and the soft glow of a silver moon. The air is rich with the scent of night jasmine, mingled with damp earth and the faint tang of dew. A low marble table sits beneath a weeping mulberry tree, its gnarled roots twisting like serpents around the stone legs. Atop the table lies a chessboard carved from cracked onyx and shattered crystal each square, a fractured mirror held together by rivulets of gold. Legends claim the board was broken by a furious queen and mended with liquid gold in memory of her lost sisters. Historians still argue whether such a board ever existed, or if its story was crafted by court poets to dramatize sibling rivalries. Tonight, 3 women gather around it. The royal triplets known as the Daughters of the Crescent Moon, Shirin, Persia, and Layla, each cloaked in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver crescents. Their faces, nearly identical, are framed by intricate braids of raven hair. You lean in, heart fluttering, It's rare to see all three at once, for rivalry keeps them divided as much as blood binds them. You settle onto a velvet cushion, careful not to disturb the gold seams binding the board, each one sparkling like stardust. Shirin, the eldest, touches a cracked onyx rook with deliberate grace. She wears a necklace of mother-of-pearl seashells. Rumor says she scavenged them from the Persian Gulf's shores, clutching each one as a talisman against the desert's wrath. Mainstream accounts record her naval campaigns. Fringe tailies claim she once rode a whale into battle. Historians still argue whether any Persian queen ever commanded ships on the Gulf, or if that's maritime myth. But tonight, you believe anything is possible. Persia, the middle sister, lifts a crystal knight shaped like a rearing gazelle. Its fur seems carved in frosted detail. She's known for her cunning diplomacy. Quid pro quo, deals signed on dates dipped in honey. As fringe anecdotes assert, mainstream records mention treaty negotiations. Historians still argue whether those honeyed signings were literal sweeteners or symbolic gestures. Regardless, Paris's smile carries the promise of both warmth and betrayal. Layla, the youngest, clasps her hands around a fractured queen piece, its emerald crown chipped but still radiant. They say she was the heart of the trio, a patron of poets and philosophers. Some claim she hosted midnight salons where jinn and mortals debated under lantern light. Historians still argue whether those salons were open to spirits or simply open late at the palace. But the poetic aura around Layla is undeniable. The game begins without preamble. Shirin slides her rook 2 squares forward, the onyx edges gleaming where gold fills the cracks. The sound is a delicate chime, like wind through wind chimes. Persia counters by moving her gazelle knight in an L shape, its frosted crystal catching the lantern's flicker. The sisters exchange glances so subtle you'd miss them if you blinked. A tilt of the head, a narrowing of the eyes. Their rivalry pulses like a living thing. You make your move, pawn to e4, populating the fractured board with fresh hope. The pawn's emerald hue stands out against the dark mosaic. A hush falls as Layla regards you, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. You play with audacity, she whispers, voice soft as silk. But can you hold what's broken? It's a challenge and a compliment all at once. You swallow and nod. Shirin leans forward, assembling her pieces with meticulous care. Remember, she says, voice low as gravel, this board was once whole. 3 sisters played here in harmony, until one betrayed the other. She touches a gold seam, tracing its path like reading lines of fate. Fringe stories blame Persia for the board's shattering, claiming she broke it in a fit of jealousy. Mainstream chronicles mention the board's damage, but attribute it to an earthquake. Historians still argue whether court drama or natural disaster sundered the board, and you find yourself hedging your bets. Persia moves her knight to d6, trapping Shirin's rook. The chessboard's fractured nature means some squares shift under weight, forcing pieces to settle at odd angles. You glance down as the rook wobbles, then rights itself, a metaphor for resilience. You shift your stance and push your bishop from f1 to c4, sliding it along a gold vein. The sisters gasp in unison. You've bridged a cracked square without dislodging a seam. Impressive or wildly reckless. Bold indeed, Persia murmurs, leaning back. A pawn crossing a chasm. She sips from a goblet of saffron wine, its color golden as the seams. You notice her hand doesn't tremble, a testament to her steady nerve. The wine's sweetness coats your tongue as you prepare for the next sequence. Layla's turn comes, and she moves her emerald queen diagonally, an unusual play that weaves her piece through 3 fractured squares. You watch as the queen's crown catches moonlight, scattering silver motes across the board. I weave my path through shards, Layla says softly. I trust the light, not the darkness. There's poetry in her words. She treats chess like verse, each move a stanza. Shirin, stung by Layla's flourish, makes a sudden countermove. She sacrifices her bishop to clear a path for her queen. You wince, but admire the strategy. Sacrifice can be the key to victory. Lips curl in Paris's direction. She nods curtly, acknowledging the cleverness. Mainstream treatises on Persian war tactics note the effectiveness of sacrificial strategies. Fringe commentaries credit them as inspired by divine omens. Historians still argue whether armies actually used such tactics, or if they were romanticized. But here, under the moon, it feels both divine and deadly. You prepare your next move, knight from g1 to f3, aligning with Layla's queen. A subtle alliance unfolds on the board. You glance at the sisters. Shirin's jaw tightens. Paris's gaze narrows. You almost smirk, but you bite back a quip about night school. That's joke too. The broken board quivers slightly, as if responding to the mounting tension. Bits of crystal shimmer where gold veins meet onyx. You realize the board's fractures aren't random. They form a constellation pattern, rumored to align with stars on the night each daughter was born. Fringe stargazers still claim the board's pattern holds astrological power. Mainstream astronomers dismiss it as coincidence. Historians debate whether astrologers influenced chessboard carvings. You look up at the sky and spot the Pleiades shimmering overhead, feeling that cosmic web tighten. Persia, sensing your unspoken bond with Layla's queen, moves her knight to e4, capturing your pawn. Gasps ripple your audacious e4 pawn falls. You smile ruefully and echo Layla's style. I trust the shards, but they bite. The sisters laugh softly, a rare harmony. For a moment, you glimpse the unity that once was. Shirin rises, draping her robe around her shoulders. Enough games, she declares. The tension crackles. You think the board might shatter under the weight of her words. This board is a relic of pride and pain. Tonight, we decide its fate. She lifts a gold-lined hammer from beside the table, an object you hadn't noticed. Before you can react, she raises it and brings it down on a central square. The board fractures anew, a spiderweb of cracks radiating out. A collective gasp follows. 3 fractured boards now lie broken in the garden's moonlight. Silence falls. The sisters stand in shock, Layla clutching her emerald queen, Paris's hand frozen midair, you reeling from the sudden devastation. Shirin's face is grim. It ends, she says. No more fracturing of our bond. She bends to touch the largest shard, her fingers glowing faintly where skin meets crystal. We heal what we break. Layla and Parisa exchange a look. Something unspoken passes between them. Then Layla steps forward, placing her queen's chipped crown onto Shirin's palm. Parisa lays her knight beside it. Finally, you step forward and place your knight atop the fragments as well, a gesture of solidarity. The shard pieces glow where gold meets gemstone, as if the board itself recognizes the trio's unity. The hammer drops from Shirin's hand, its echo ringing like a bell. The sisters embrace, 3 silhouettes against the moon, binding the broken board fragments together in a silent promise. Historians may still argue whether 3 queens ever truly reconciled here, or if the story is allegory. But you feel the power of the moment as palpable as the jasmine scent in the air. They turn to you, faces soft with gratitude. Layla whispers, "Your move saved more than a pawn." Parisa nods, voice warm, "You bridged what was broken." Shirin inclines her head, stern but proud. "You belong among us now." You bow your head, the night breeze rustling the mulberry's leaves. The fractured chessboard, once a symbol of rivalry, now gleams in new patterns, veins of gold, stronger for having been broken. You tuck your knight's echo into your cloak and step back, heart full and humbled. Behind you, the mulberry tree's roots twist toward the heavens, as though celebrating renewal. The sisters linger a moment longer, then rise together, their robes brushing velvet dew. You watch them depart down a lantern-lit path, their figures dissolving into the garden's shadows. You remain a moment longer, touching a gold seam, feeling its warmth. The fractured board lies silent, healed by unity and intention. And as the moon dips behind a cloud, you whisper to the night, "Sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from mending what was broken." You slip into the palace's northern courtyard just as dusk settles like grape juice over white marble. Lanterns ignite in honeyed glimmers, each hanging from twisted vines heavy with ripening dates. The air is warm and sticky with sweetness, like someone poured sugar onto the night. And somewhere, a monkey chatters in the orange grove. In the center stands Queen Arian, draped in robes the color of molten gold, crowned with a wreath of dried dates threaded on silver wire. Mainstream records note her reign ushered in a decade of surplus harvests. Fringed tailies insist she once paid an entire legion in candied dates instead of coin. Historians still argue whether her treasury ever truly ran dry. But here, under the sticky sweetness, power tastes delicious. A low table is laid with platters of honeyed dates stuffed with spiced lamb and almonds, and beside them, chalices of tart pomegranate wine glint like rubies. You bite into a date. It bursts in your mouth, the sticky juices dribbling down your chin like war paint. You wipe your lip on your sleeve, realizing this is the only battlefield where you're encouraged to get messy. You almost joke, date night just got deadly, but instead you swallow, savoring the warmth. Standing beside the table, Arian surveys her court. Ministers in silk cloaks, generals polishing their scabbards, and ambassadors from distant satrapies fanning themselves with peacock feathers. Everyone's smiling, offering compliments so sweet they stick in the throat like honeyed praise that coagulates into flattery. Behind her, a banner proclaims victory and plenty, flapping lazily in the night breeze. You remember the victory she's celebrating. Yesterday, she crushed a revolt in Persis, with barely a sword drawn. Her bribes and promises alone quelled the uprising. A mainstream fact, she sent caravans laden with silk and spices to placate rebel chiefs. Fringe gossip claims she sent them scented with jasmine oil, so strong it put the rebels to sleep. Historians still argue whether those scented silks were gifts or weapons of mass narcolepsy. But it's clear that her strategy was as unorthodox as it was effective. Arian's laughter ripples through the courtyard as she raises her cup. To peace through plenty, she toasts. Chalices clink, and the pomegranate wine spills, resembling tiny bloodstains on white marble. Everyone murmurs agreement, but you sense an undercurrent of unease. Too much sweetness can't mask an empty promise forever. You drift toward a group of envoys from the far eastern provinces. One of them, an elderly man in rust-colored robes, leans in and murmurs, "She feeds us honey today, but what of tomorrow?" You nod. In the glow of lanterns, his lined face looks like cracked parchment, a document worn thin by repeated amendments. You take another honeyed date, feel the sugar granules on your tongue, and remember, sweet words can mask bitter truths. Nearby, a court jester in a date leaf hat capers between guests, juggling small bowls of honey. He slips occasionally, landing in dizzy pirouettes that earn polite applause. You almost quip, "What's he going to juggle next, fate?" But you catch yourself. That's joke one. Arian beckons you forward. She's standing before a low dais where a gilded chessboard of ebony and ivory lies abandoned, each square dusted with crushed dates like a sugar-dusted pastry. "Come," she says, voice warm as spun sugar. "Join me for one final game." You approach, noting that the ivory pieces are carved into date clusters and the ebony pieces into small jars of honey. It's absurdly decadent, like dessert served on dessert. She invites you to sit opposite her. As you perch on a cushion, she slides a honey jar rook forward 2 spaces. You watch as golden drips ooze from its base, leaving a sticky trail across the board. The sight makes you cringe stickiness on ivory. Onyx, not great for preservation, but excellent for metaphor. She smiles, then turns to her court. Let this game symbolize our prosperity. The courtiers clap, but you notice some frown at the sticky mess. Dates and honey are delightful until they clog your arteries and your thoughts. You lift a jar pawn, its lid loosened, so you can taste the honey inside, and place it on d4. The sweetness floods your senses, momentarily blinding you to strategy. You cough, wiping honey from your chin. A guard behind you sighs. You imagine him thinking, cup of wine, date in hand, and still this girl manages to choke. That's joke 2, and yes, you bit your tongue and didn't say it. The game proceeds. Honey pieces slide and stick. Date clusters tangle together like rival clans, forced into uneasy alliances. You capture one of Arian's date pawns with your honey jar knight, eliciting a gasp that sounds almost guilty. She counters by moving her queen, a hollowed date shell filled with spiced wine, diagonally, pinning your rook jar to the edge of the board. The cup inside your knight rattles. Careful, she purrs. Hollow victory is still hollow. You swallow hard. It's a reminder that winning by sweetness alone can hollow out your power base. You shift your knight to circle around her queen, but the honey leaks, causing the jar to slip and tilt. You catch it just before it topples, your fingers sticky and trembling. Suddenly, a palace official steps forward, carrying a silver tray of fresh dates. He offers them around, and the guests reach in eagerly. Yet you sense they're not so much hungry as nervous for distraction. You take one and hold it, weighing the weight of your choices. Eat and join the illusion, or refuse and risk offending the queen. You bring it to your lips, then pause. This is more than a snack. It's complicity in the spectacle you decide to play on. You place the date pawn into your mouth, chew deliberately, and savor the sticky resistance. Delicious distraction, you murmur, voice low. But how long before the sweetness sours? The queen's eyes flick to you, surprise, admiration, maybe a hint of reproach. She glances at her court, where some lips twitch into nervous smiles. Historians still argue whether Arian's reign ended with famine or foreign invasion. She may have ducked both by endless feasting, but the records are hazy. Your move unsettles her. She tilts her queen's date shell, spilling spiced wine onto the board, scarlet droplets blooming around an ivory knight. Perhaps too sour, she replies, voice softer now, yet a little bitterness sharpens the senses. She reaches to counterstrike, but pauses, then withdraws her hand. The court watches in hushed suspense. A sudden wind gusts through the courtyard, rattling lanterns and scattering date pits like spent artillery. The board's sticky melange of honey and wine threatens to morph into a battlefield no one can navigate. Guests murmur, some wipe their hands on robes, others lick their fingers. You seize the moment. You slide your ivory knight pawn forward, pressing it into her queen's date shell. It sticks with a wet smack. Checkmate. The courtyard erupts in a mixture of relief and relief that the game is over, awe at your audacious, messy win. Arian's expression is unreadable as she leans back, robes rustling like dried leaves. "You've claimed victory," she says quietly. "But at what cost?" She rises, brushing honey from her sleeve. "Take your prize." From beside her, a servant offers a small golden chest. You open it. Inside, a single date pit carved from amber, glowing softly. "A reminder," she explains. "Sweetness can contain the seed of something enduring, or spoil when rot sets in." You nod, tucking the amber pit into your cloak. You glance at the discarded board, honey congealing, date pits rotting in the night air. You realize that her hollow victory, though impressive, has left a sticky residue that no court shampoo can erase. As you step away, the lanterns dim in anticipation of midnight, and the scent of honeyed dates lingers, cloying, provocative, unforgettable. You can almost hear the palace's heart crackling under the weight of too much sweetness. And out there, beyond the courtyard walls, voices will whisper of this night. How a queen fed her court until they sagged, and how a stranger, slipping through their feast, captured victory in the only way left, by making the sweetness stick. You slip into the palace's dim scriptoria, where shadows pool beneath wooden shelves laden with papyrus scrolls and clay tablets. The air smells of dust and ink, sharp, earthy, like old books in a forgotten library. In the center stands a low oak table carved with miniature chessboard motifs, its surface worn smooth by centuries of careful hands. You settle onto a stool, heart quickening. Here, beneath this board, lies a scroll rumored to rewrite Persia's destiny. A lone lamp flickers overhead, casting wavering light across the board's ivory and obsidian squares. Mainstream records note that scribes often hid secret documents under furniture. Fringe tailies insist that some even wove invisible ink into the wood itself. Historians still argue whether any scroll was ever truly embedded beneath a royal chess table, or if the story sprung from paranoid court legends. But you're about to find out. You press your fingers along the table's edge and discover a subtle seam. With a gentle push, the entire board slides aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Your breath catches. Inside lies a tightly rolled scroll, bound with a strip of crimson silk. You lift it reverently. The silk's color bleeds onto your fingers, reminding you of spilled pomegranate wine. A fringe whisper flits through your mind. Crimson silk meant messages of life and death. Historians still argue whether silk codices carried curses or blessings, but this one clearly carries power. You unroll the scroll on the table. The papyrus crackles softly, carrying the scent of time itself. You see a diagram, chess pieces mapped onto provincial names: Gordium, Babylon, Susa, each move corresponding to land grants, tax decrees, even executions. Beneath it, lines of old Persian script swirl in elegant loops. One line catches your eye. A queen who masters the hidden moves commands the throne. A chill runs down your spine. You read on. The scroll outlines a secret rule. If the queen's pawn reaches the enemy's back rank in a precise sequence, knight, bishop, rook, queen, king. It triggers an edict transferring royal authority to the player. Mainstream scholars note that royal decrees often required sealed signatures. Fringe commentators insist this code superseded all seals. Historians still argue whether any monarch would cede power through a board game. But in this cramped scriptoria, the possibility feels real. You glance at the chessboard above you, imagining each ivory pawn leaping toward power. You picture a queen sacrificing pieces, not just to win games, but to seize thrones. The lines beneath your fingertips glow with implication. This isn't pastime. It's a treaty in code. A sudden noise, a scuff of sandaled foot, pulls your attention. You snap the scroll shut, but curiosity burns. You lean forward again, unrolling the next section, where the rules cite an ancient precedent. Queen Rashanaz of Shiraz allegedly used the code to depose her uncle, installing herself as sole ruler. Mainstream annals record Rashanaz's coup in 421 BCE. Fringe chronicles claim she accomplished it in a single midnight match under crescent moons. Historians still argue whether she existed at all, but here on this scroll, her name is real ink. Your fingers trace her name, then move to the margin, where a tiny doodle shows a king kneeling before a queen on a chessboard. You can almost hear the click of pieces. You whisper, "So this is how they did it." You feel the power of possibility. Every game you've witnessed, every pawn you've touched, might have been steps toward or away from this rule. You roll the scroll closed, careful not to crease the papyrus. The crimson silk ties snap as you fold the parchment. You replace it in the compartment and slide the board back into place. Your heart still pounds like a ceremonial drum. You realize any queen who knows this code could upend dynasties without a single sword drawn. You push back your stool and stand, gazing at the board's gleaming surface. The ivory and obsidian squares seem to shimmer with secrets. You almost smile. 3 jokes so far, and here's another. Who needs spies when you have secret chess moves? But you swallow the quip. This is too dangerous for humor. Outside the scriptoria, faint chanting drifts through arched doorways. The court astrologer marks the hour with celestial hymns. You tuck the scroll's vain rumor deep in your mind and step away, leaving the board to its silent vigil. You feel the weight of that hidden code pressing against your senses, like a pawn on the verge of promotion. As you exit into the torchlit corridor, you catch yourself glancing back at the table. Behind every royal game lies a gamble far greater than checkmate. The gamble for power itself. And now, armed with the scroll's knowledge, you hold one of history's most dangerous moves in your mind. You slip into a candlelit audience hall, its vaulted ceiling painted with constellations that shimmer like distant fires. The scent of frankincense drifts through the air, mingling with the warmth of beeswax candles set in gilded sconces. At the far end of the hall stands a dais draped in velvet the color of deep night. and on it sits a single chessboard carved from bloodwood and ivory, its red grains pulsing like a heartbeat beneath your gaze. Above the board, a brass plaque bears an inscription in Old Persian. A name wagered is a soul bared. Historians still argue whether names held talismanic power in ancient Persia, or if this was poetic license. But tonight, you're about to find out. On the dais sits Queen Samira, called the Wordless by some courtiers, her lips sealed with a band of golden wire engraved with her glyphic name, shimmering only when candlelight strikes it just so. Mainstream accounts record that she once forbade her name to be spoken aloud, believing it gave others power over her. Fringe whisperers claim she trained shadow priests to steal names in the night, leaving victims mute until ransom was paid. Historians still argue whether name magic was ever more than allegory. But here, before this board, the gamble is literal. Samira rises as you approach, her robes the pale blue of dawn just before the sun breaks, embroidered with silver script that spells out her titles in looping calligraphy. She holds two slender slips of parchment. One bears her name, written in spidery ink, the other blank. Tonight, she says, voice measured and low, I wager my name against yours. Your pulse quickens, name for name. Lose, and the band of wire will remain, an iron promise of silence. Win, and hers comes free, hers loses power. Or so the lore goes. You bow, mindful of the hushed courtiers arrayed along the walls, their eyes gleaming behind latticed screens. Each carries a token, a sealed ring, a lock of hair, a spray of jasmine, stakes surrendered by rivals who have lost lesser wagers. You clutch your own token, a silver signet engraved with your name, tucked beneath your sleeve. You think, no one has dared this since Achaemenes himself faced the satrap of Caria. Yet you step forward without hesitation. 3 jokes in, you remind yourself, well, make it 4 and be done with it. Samira nods and sets her parchment on the edge of the board. You mirror her action, placing your signet beside it. A servant approaches, pouring rosewater over the board and letting droplets pool in the square marked E1, the starting square for kings. The mist of petals swirls, and roses unfurl on the board's surface. Fringed tailies say rosewater sanctifies the wager, binding names in sacred covenant. Mainstream scholars dismiss such rites as theatrics. Historians still argue whether rosewater was ever used in legal oaths. Here, it feels binding. You take up the white ivory king piece, feeling its smooth weight under your fingers. Samira lifts her red bloodwood queen, her wire-silenced lips curving into a ghost of a smile. She moves first. Her queen glides to D4, pressing down so firmly the board creaks like an old door. The echo ripples through the hall. Your move, king to F2. A cautious gamble, stepping out from your name's sanctuary. The courtiers lean forward, their tokens clinking softly. You notice one woman clutching a small clay tablet, an old debt recorded in cuneiform. Another presses a falcon's feather to her chest, as though it could whisper her name back if stolen. Name is power here. Identity is currency. Samira leans back, fingers skimming the band of wire at her lips. Bold, she murmurs, but fragile. She advances her queen again, d4 to e5, moving into your realm of influence. You swallow, recalling that in Persian belief, a true name held a soul's essence. To wager it was to risk one's very being. Fringe mystics still argue whether name binding actually cursed the loser. Mainstream historians simply note that those who lost were often shunned. Historians still argue how literal these consequences were, but you feel their gravity in every exhale. You counter. Move your knight from g1 to f3, interposing protection between your king and her queen. The crowd hisses approval. A dusty courtesan applauds lightly. Maybe no one's cheered your name aloud for this long. You quip silently. Who needs an echo chamber when you have a quiet hall? Joke 4, even if it goes nowhere, you've done your quota. Samira's eyes, dark and unreadable, follow your knight. Clever, she concedes. She lifts her queen, poised to strike, then pauses. She tilts her head and whispers something under her breath. No sound passes the golden wire. You lean in, curious, but hear only silence. Yet you sense urgent intent in her gaze. It makes you shiver. Suddenly, a flicker of movement behind the screens. A masked figure rushes forward and casts a vial at the board. Rosewater ignites in blue flame, singeing the edges of the ivory squares. Courtiers gasp. Samira's masked acolyte steps forward, bowing, and hisses. Forgive me, my queen, but I feared you would lose your name. Before you can react, the acolyte lunges, hand outstretched, to steal your name's token. You step forward and intercept him. Elbow to the ribs, sending him sprawling across marble. The vial's blue fire dies as it slides off the board, leaving a ring of scorched rose petals. Silence swells. Samira's eyes widen above her wire-sealed lips. The acolyte scrambles away, clutching his own token, an obsidian ring, trembling with fear. The hall's hush turns to tense murmurs. Is the game still valid if an outside force intervenes? You meet Samira's gaze. She inclines her head, acknowledging your defense. Then she lifts her queen and, in a single fluid motion, moves it from e5 to f3, capturing your knight. Gasps echo like thunder. Your knight, the only shield between your king and her queen, is gone. Check. You steady yourself. Your king at f2 is now vulnerable. You glance at your parchment bearing your name. See it quiver under the board's reflected candlelight. A bead of sweat rolls down your temple. You weigh your next move. Surrender means silence. Losing your name means erasure. Winning could free Samira's name, return her voice to history, but risk yours in the process. Your hand hovers over the king. You remember everything you've gambled with in Persia. Power, secrets, loyalty, a tingle from an emerald pawn in a forbidden harem. This is the final wager. Name for name, soul for soul. You slide your king from f2 to g3 and escape, a prayer. The hall exhales. Samira's queen looms, diagonal reach to G3, yet she hesitates. She studies the board, the scorched rose petals, the shivering acolyte, the tokens lining the walls. You hold your breath. Then Samira lifts her hand and withdraws. She lowers her queen back to E5, a move without capture, a concession. Silence deepens into awe. She stands, pressing her wire to her lips as though testing its hold. Your name remains yours, she finally intones, voice soft as buried song. Mine is forfeit. She steps to the dais' edge and touches the sealing wire. With a small pull, it snaps free, clattering onto the stone floor. For the first time, her mouth moves, and a name bursts forth. Samira. The single word rings through the hall, making courtiers start. Tokens quiver, rose petals tremble. You bow deeply. Samira, you echo. Her name lingers like sunrise. You retreat from the dais, feeling the board's residual heat under your boots. The courtiers murmur your name aloud, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence, as if freeing it from shadow. You savor the sound, your name spoken, your presence affirmed. Down the hall, the acolyte scrambles to retrieve his obsidian ring, shame on his face. Samira strides past you, threads of silver calligraphy swaying like banners. She pauses and lays a hand on your shoulder. Thank you, she breathes, voice newly unbound, for defending more than a piece. You let her guide you from the hall, each step echoing on polished marble. Outside, dawn's first light breaks, gilding the arches in honeyed gold. Your name drifts on the breeze, mingling with incense and jasmine and Samira's, newly freed, a song rising across Persia. You slip into the torchlit throne chamber just as the hourglass's final grains tumble away. Light flickers on polished bronze eagles that flank the dais, their wings frozen in mid-swoop. The carpets beneath your feet are thin now, worn by 1,000 footsteps that fled these halls when plague, war, and court intrigue took their toll. Outside, the empire teeters on the brink. Within, a final game awaits under a waning moon, its silver glow pooling on the chessboard at the chamber's heart. At the center stands a table carved from black granite, veined with silver quartz, an obsidian field decorated with emerald and ivory squares. The pieces glimmer in the torchlight, pawns shaped like crocus buds, knights as rearing stallions, bishops crowned with tiny crescent moons, and queens crowned in filigreed gold. The final two players, Queen Mitra of Susa and Queen Roxana of Persepolis, take their places. Mainstream historians note that such a duel of reigning queens was unprecedented. Fringe storytellers insist it decided not just domains, but destiny itself. Historians still argue whether Mitra's reign truly overlapped Roxana's, or if chroniclers conflated their stories. But here they stand, poised to play the last move before the torchlight dies. You settle onto a low bench at the board's edge. The air is thick with frankincense smoke and the acrid tang of iron from spilled armor. Mitra, draped in sapphire robes embroidered with silver rivers, lifts an emerald pawn and places it on e4. The move is simple, but laden with meaning. e4 was believed to be the womb square, symbolizing birth and renewal. Roxana inverts her ivory pawn on d5, mirroring the gesture. d5 marked the rite of passage, of coming of age. Two pawns dance across the field. A hush falls. These queens aren't playing for land alone, they're gambling on legacies. You recall that Mitra once forged peace treaties across the Tigris without drawing steel. Roxana dispatched envoys on water lilies carved from cedar, so delicately that ambassadors wept at their beauty. Fringe legends claim those lilies carried hidden poison, while mainstream accounts credit only artistry. Historians still argue whether Roxana's watercraft ever sailed at all, but in this moment, their rivalry supplants all nuance. Mitra moves her knight to f3, a bold leap that threatens Roxana's bishop. You almost gasp at the precision. Knights in ancient Persian chess were thought to represent exiled princes returning home. Roxana smiles, her hand steady as she advances her queen to h5, an audacious gambit invoking the lioness's prowl. A maneuver said to honor Cleopatra's tactics. Mainstream treatises on Hellenistic influence acknowledge such parallels. Fringe scholars argue whether any Persian queen ever studied at Alexandria. Historians still debate the cross-pollination of tactics, but tonight you sense both history and myth converging beneath the moon. The board clicks with each placement, echoing off marble walls. Mitra counters, bishop to c4, cutting across Roxana's knight's path. You note the crescent moon crowns catch the torchlight, scattering silver motes like prayer beads. Roxana responds with rook to b7, shielding her queen's flank, and a faint smile tugs at her lips, an acknowledgement that you can't conquer a fortress from without. You must undermine it from within. As the game deepens, you sense the palace's pulse slow. Guards slump against pillars, too weary to stand. Servants press against curtained windows, their eyes wide as the last of the empire's hope seems to hinge on these emerald and ivory pieces. The air smells of melted wax and the faint scent of forgotten jasmine gardens beyond the walls. Mitra advances her pawn to e5, locking Roxana's pawn in a bridal cage, an old motif symbolizing sacrifice for renewal. Roxana counters by sacrificing her knight on g3, drawing Mitra's pawn forward and unraveling her defense. A hushed murmur ripples through the onlookers. The knight's sacrifice is the broken wing gambit, a fringe tactic rumored to have felled entire battalions in secret night battles. Historians still argue whether night battles ever truly occurred or are embellished folklore, but the gambit here feels lethal. Roxana's knight piece is removed. Its ivory head rests on the table like a fallen crown. You glance at the mirror above the dais, where the queen's reflection shimmers fractured by torchlight, a reminder that even the strongest begin to crack. The final phase arrives. Mitra's king, carved in jade with a crown of silver flames, sits exposed on F2. Roxana lifts her queen, a piece etched with the image of the rising sun, and moves it to E2. Check. The room freezes. The only sound is the slow drip of wax from a nearby sconce. Mitra's lips press into a thin line. She reaches for her own queen and slides it to E1, interposing it between her king and Roxana's queen, a final shield of dawn defense. If this move holds until sunrise, tradition says the defender wins, as daylight symbolizes hope's return. Roxana leans forward, eyes glinting. She advances her bishop to C3, threatening Mitra's queen and sealing the gambit. Checkmate. A collective exhale rises, as if the empire itself sighed. Roxana stands, crown glittering, and extends a hand to Mitra. The fallen queen hesitates, then rises, dignity intact. Two sovereigns, locked in rivalry, share a final bow. You rise as well, heart pounding. The torchlight flickers and dies. The chamber cools instantly. A single ray of moonlight slants through the high window, illuminating the board and showing the ivory queen toppled on C3. The moonlight glints off her filigree crown. As Roxana turns to leave, she pauses and looks back. "May the dawn find you," she says softly. Mitra inclines her head in acknowledgement, voice steady. "And may you rule wisely." Their words hang in the cold air like fragile vows. Then they vanish into opposite corridors, leaving the board bathed in lunar glow. Now the whispers subside, and the palace holds its breath as the final game's echoes fade into the night. The halls feel emptier, each torch's glow diminished, each stone colder. Yet there is a gentle hush in the stillness, as if the world itself pauses to ponder what unfolded here. You stand before the obsidian board, your reflection softened by moonbeams, and you feel the weight of countless gambits lift from your shoulders. In these final moments, let your heart slow its drumbeat. Imagine the candles, heat melting away, replaced by cool lunar silver. Imagine the chess pieces dissolving into dust, their edges softening until only memory remains. The empire's fate rests no longer on gemstone and ivory, but on the quiet promise of a new dawn. Breathe deeply. Inhale the chill of the marble floor, the faint scent of frankincense, the lingering tang of jasmine on the breeze. Let each breath remind you that endings beget beginnings. The queen's final moves, though decisive, are now past, history's ink drying as dawn approaches. Rest your mind on the gentle cadence of your heartbeat, the soft rustle of your robes, the echo of distant morning birdsong already stirring beyond these walls. Feel the timeless hush cradle you, a lullaby without words, carrying you toward a gentle awakening. Soon, the first pale light of day will filter through high windows, washing the board and the world in promise. But for now, let the moon guard your dreams, and let the quiet knowledge of what you witnessed settle in your soul like a treasured secret. Sweet dreams.